Hello, my name is Connor Quinlan and I'm going to be doing a review on the Nikon D80. Now, first thing you're going to notice is how small it is. It is a very small camera. It only weighs 1 pound and 5 ounces, which is significantly lighter than the D200 body. Now, it is not much smaller. It's a lot larger actually and a lot heavier than the D40 and the D40X, which are now the smallest digital SLRs on the market today. So if you're looking for small size, the D80 is not as small as those two. But if you're looking for a mid-range SLR for a reasonable price, the D80 might just be the camera for you. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the build and some of the controls on the body of the Nikon D80. Now Nikon spent a lot of time trying to make a specific design for the D80 and it really paid off. The design of the D80 is very professional. It's very nice. It's very compact. The controls are put in great spots. It's very nice to hold in my hand. It feels very sturdy. Definitely feels a lot like a professional camera should. And it's very simple to control. Now we're going to go over some of those controls here. Here you've got your flash button and your bracketing button, and then up here you've got your mode control dial, and it has the 4 settings up here: manual, aperture, shutter, and programmed. But it also has 7 other scene menu selections that you would mostly find on a compact camera. So this would make a great camera. So this camera was basically built also for those moving up from compact cameras. And then you've got all your little buttons here by the side of the LCD screen. And this is your play button that lets you view your pictures. And when you press your menu button, when we get here to the menu, there are only 5 menus on here, and it's very easy to read and it's customizable as well. So if you look closely here, this is the playback menu, and this is the shooting menu. Then you've got a customs menu, a setup menu, and then you've got a retouch menu. Now this retouch menu here is new on the D80. It's not found on the D200, and what that does basically is you can retouch your pictures without having to put them into a computer, so that can be a really useful feature. And that was a little bit on the build. Actually I have a little more up here. This is the LCD screen in which everything is displayed, all your information. Then you've got your AF button, a continue shooting button, EV button, and then you've got a metering button here. Then up here you've got a function button right there, and then your depth of field button. So this is the build of the Nikon D80. The AF button, a continue. Now we're going to go over some of the things that are in the D80 and how the D80 works. Now, as for lenses and what lenses you can use with these, you can use any lens basically from 1986 and it'll work perfectly fine. But one thing to note is that the metering system in this camera does not work with manual focusing lenses. Now, one great feature that's different from the D70, which this is the upgrade of that, is this has a beautiful viewfinder, much bigger than the D70. It's as large as the D200's viewfinder, which means it only has a 0.94 times magnification level, so you basically see the whole picture through the viewfinder. Now, as for its AF, it's got 11-point AF system, which is basically just the same as the D200. It uses a multicam 1000 module, which is also the same as the D200. It's very fast, and it has it's very different from the D40 and the D40X. The D40 and the D40X only have 3 points. This, like I said, has 11 points, is a lot more precise, a lot faster autofocus system. The metering on this camera, it has a 420 segment RGB color matrix metering. It's called 3D color matrix metering too. Now, this is a 420 segment. The D200 has a 1005 segment reading, so this is not as good as the Nikon D200s, but it's reasonably good. If you want a much more precise metering system and one that gets more correct exposure than the D200, is definitely the camera to look at. Now, as for its shutter, it mechanically can only go from 30 seconds to 1/4000th of a second. Now, the D70 could go all the way up to 1/8000th of a second. That would have been a nice feature, but sadly, this camera does not go up to that. It only goes up to 1/4000th of a second. Now, it has a flash sync of 1 200th of a second, and that is significantly slower than the D70's was. That had a flash sync of 1/500th of a second. Now, it's frames per second. It can shoot 3 frames per second, which is reasonably fast. It's not the most amazing sports or action camera. For that, you probably want to get the D200, which shoots 5 frames per second, and that can be essential for getting that for if you're a sports or action photographer. Now, the buffer, it really depends on the settings. In RAW mode, it can, if you have it on continuous shooting, you can only get out 6 shots. And then you have to wait to shoot again. So if you're a RAW shooter, this doesn't have a huge buffer, but if you shoot JPEG, especially around the medium quality setting, you can get up to 100 pictures on continuous shooting. So in that area, it can take a lot of pictures. Its sensor now is a 10 megapixel sensor. It's a CCD sensor, and it's a definitely much bigger upgrade from the D70, which had a 6 megapixel sensor. It has the exact same sensor as the D200, and it can take 3 different types of pictures: large, medium, and small pictures, which is the equivalent of 10 megapixels, 5 megapixels, and 3 megapixels. Now its ISO range, it goes from 100 to 300 and 3200 ISO, which is a very broad range, and it has an auto setting, which is only found in Nikon cameras. It has an auto setting from 100 to 1600 ISO, which means it automatically chooses the ISO for the type of situation you're shooting in. That's a very, very nice feature it has. Now, its white balance, it has 7 white balances. It has daylight, tungsten, cloudy, fluorescent, flash, shade, and these all have easy fine-tuning. It also has direct color temperature in degrees, which is called Kelvin, and it also has present manual using white or gray cards, which is a very weird type of setting. I don't use that much, so you'd have to read about that to understand exactly what it does. Now, the D200's 1005 sensor is a lot better in terms of getting the exposure and getting the white balance correct. This is a little inconsistent. Although it is still very good, it's just a little inconsistent, and it also tends to overexpose the picture. So to stop this from happening, really what I do is I just turn down the EV to negative 0.7 stops, and that way I can get a very good picture that's not overexposed. So that's how you can fix that overexposure problem with the metering. Now there's image adjustments in this, just like every other Nikon, with contrast, sharpness, saturation, stuff like that. Now its histogram is full color, of course, just like the D200. Now it's got file formats. Its file formats are NEF, RAW, and JPEG. Now its memory takes SD cards, not CF cards, not compact flash. It takes these types of cards, like the Ultra 2 2GB memory card, which is what I recommend. It's a very good gigabyte card. Writes very fast. Now, we're going to go on to image quality a little bit, and its image quality is the same as the D200, which is excellent. The D80's image quality is absolutely wonderful. It makes smooth, sharp, colorful, noise, and artifact-free images, which is very good. Now, the exposure. And, of course, like I said, the bad news is its metering system can be a little bit off. It tends to overexpose, and it's just not consistent like the D200's metering system is. As for color, the color is great. It's very similar to the D200's color. It's not at all like the D70's color, however. It's a lot warmer and a lot more saturated. The D70's color is a lot cooler and not as saturated. So this is definitely a better camera in terms of color. And this has been a review of the Nikon D80 SLR camera.